People of Reddit. What secrets do you have that you would take to the grave with you, but would be willing to share anonymously?
There's part of me that's always felt so guilty about this, but the other part of me thinks that I did the right thing. When my mother-in-law was in hospice and dying, we had gotten the call that her last rites were being read to her, and we should come because it was very close. The family gathered in her room. My father-in-law, her husband of 42 years, had been by her side and hadn't left for days. We were there for hours. My sister-in-laws had to take their kids home at some point, so they had left, and it was just my husband, me, and my father-in-law left. The nurses were saying that they might have spoken too soon because she was still hanging on. It was awful to watch. My father-in-law looked ragged and tired, and he said he was just going to go to the other floor for a cup of coffee. My husband went with him. I said I would call if something changed, but he was only going to be gone for 15 minutes maybe. About 5 minutes after they left, my mother-in-law really started to have very labored breathing. I called the nurse to see what was happening, and by the time she came to the room, maybe 2 minutes, she had passed. I asked the nurse to wait for me to get my father-in-law and husband back to the room to pronounce her dead. They rushed back and my father-in-law held her, and after a minute the nurse and doctor pronounced. My father-in-law believes he made it back to the room and was holding her while she left this life. I have never told him or my husband. Only me and that sweet nurse know she was already gone. I have debated telling my husband this, but he's always said he was comforted by watching his dad hold his mom when she died. I know I will never tell my father-in-law this. When he talks about her, he always mentions how he was there for that moment, and I don't want to take that away from him. It would crush him. Part of me thinks she waited for everyone to leave the room, so they didn't have to actually see her go. She was always worried about everybody else. I've never told anyone.
I was helping a friend fix their computer when I found CP on the computer. I fixed the computer and made an anonymous tip to the police. He was arrested about a year later. He was part of a ring, and they got something like 30 pedophiles. We aren't friends anymore, and he never suspected it was me behind him getting arrested. He was a minor part of the ring, but the tip helped them investigate it further. It ended up being pretty big news here. A friend who is outwardly happily married pulled me aside before the wedding, at which I was a groomsman, to have a word. I thought he was just having cold feet, so I rather jocularly asked him if staring down the barrel of a life sentence had got him looking for the door. Well, he got extremely serious and said that I was right because he's gay and can't ever truly love his soon-to-be wife the way he should. This was a confident, swaggering dude who I thought would punch a lion in the face if it looked at him the wrong way. The kind of dude who conveys with his posture that he means business, and his business is being awesome. I always thought of him as the man with a plan, who never got flustered and always had the right answer to our silly problems. And here he was in front of me, quaking and filled with terror because he knew that he had gotten himself into a real jam by being dishonest with himself and those he cared about. I hated it. It was like watching my dad get beat up. My advice was to be honest with his fiancée and to talk to her before the ceremony about it. That no one would blame him, that this happens, and that while it was painful now he would be respected in the long term for being upfront and preventing further hurt. He left me saying that he would do so. He came back 30 minutes later pale and sweaty and told us all the ceremony was still on. It was, and they got married and we all toasted their future while he shot me pained looks all night long, looks that gradually faded the more he drank and lost himself in the celebration. They've been married for 5 years and have a kid. They look happy. I hope they are. It's not for me to say anything, but I will be there for both of them when he spills the beans. I'm rich as frick. Family thinks I'm not doing well, and I want to keep it that way. As soon as they hear anything about money they come and leech it away and use it for drugs and shoot. I don't live fancy. I bought a nice 1-bedroom apartment where I live with my 2 cats, Peanut and Pipsqueak. I have a nice computer and a normal car. I just save my money or donate it to random charities every now and then. Genuine question. I'm doing fine but not well off by any means. I truly feel money will bring me happiness. Are you happier now? Happier? No. I'm the same person who just plays video games in peace, so I've always been pretty happy. However, I grew up poor and money is a big safety blanket and it removes the majority of stress from your life. However, for a lot of people, frick ya, money buys happiness. You can travel all over the globe, you can do whatever you want within legal reasons-ish, and people will shower you with mostly fake love. I had a couple of years where I binged on spending, watched too much of Dan Bilzerian stuff, but it just wasn't who I am, and I am much happier being a dork playing games.
I was raped at age 14. Like 3 people know. That's it. But what no one knows is I fell pregnant, and before I even got to tell my mom, my dad beat me so hard, for something unrelated, that I miscarried.
Oh lady, I'm so sorry. I hope things are better for you now.
My family weren't well off at all money-wise. So much so that whenever things were extremely tough when I was a young teen, I'd imagine it would be easier if one of my siblings passed away, large family, and would try to figure out which one's death would be the least noticeable. One of my siblings passed away a few years ago, and I sure as hell am never telling my family that those thoughts ever crossed my mind. If I'd known back then how losing one of them would feel, I would never have entertained the idea.
Having these thoughts definitely weren't your greatest achievements, but our minds are rampant with all kinds of ideas when put through tough situations like you were in. When we're struggling, our brains are on fight or flight mode sometimes, and we just want to find solutions to our problems. These thoughts weren't a factor in your sibling's passing. If you could talk to your sibling right now, I'm sure they'd say the same thing. I hope you and your family are now in a better place financially. My former stepsister molested me for 3 years, 6 until I was 9. No one in my personal life knows, and I'd like to keep it that way.
It's obviously going to be a different thing for everybody, but I'd suggest at least talking through it with a therapist if you haven't already done so. It's been kind of shocking to me how many issues I've had that tied back into trauma that I had completely failed to make a connection between.
Just mentioning it on here a while ago for the first time was a huge weight off, honestly. I'm planning on therapy for some other issues eventually. I might end up telling them, but don't really want anyone close to me to know.
I know what my grandmother tossed into the well in her backyard before it was boarded up. It was a box of love letters she discovered written by my grandfather's girlfriend. Since she never knew of his affair, I think it broke her heart. Part of her went down that well with those letters.
When I was a teenager, I got really drunk, and my friend dared me to take a shit in someone's front garden. I did. Months later, my mother moved into the house, and the shit was still in the garden. She went mad about people not cleaning up after their dogs. My mother cleaned my shit out of her garden. Destiny. Like, comment, and share. Reddit Story Topper. Subscribe now.